Three, two, one, let's go. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode on the George Habib podcast. As you guys know, I have a special consideration on this show for veterans of war. I feel like this is a group of people who honestly have given up a lot to have a perspective that most civilians don't have. I feel like these are some of the people who have seen the realities of life and in some sense make sure like they do their best to make sure that the average person doesn't have to deal with that reality. So, with that introduction, I would like to introduce another special guest today. His name is Tom. He's a veteran of the US Navy and he is a petty officer second class. Although he will correct me if I am wrong. Tom, I welcome you here on the channel today. How's it going?
Oh, fabulous. Thanks for asking. It's an honor and privilege to be on.
And it's an honor and privilege to have you on, Tom. I hope I was correct on the rank petty officer second class
Correct.
of the US Navy.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to confirm, to give a background on Tom's service, Tom has seen action in Operation Eldorado, based in Libya, Operation Praying Mantis, based in Iran. He's traveled all around the world from the Philippines, Australia, South America, everywhere except the Caribbean, according to Tom. Is that true, Tom?
That's correct. That's correct. Aboard the USS Enterprise.
Awesome. And Tom, tell us now, where are you based at these days? What are you up to?
Well, right now I'm living in Southwest Florida. Secure, greatly educated. With a good job. I just volunteered with the local military museum as of today. I went up and checked it out. They got an awesome museum up there, and by Punta Gorda. Let's get that right. So I'm chilling out here, moving to the warmer weather. I just came from Colorado, and again, I lived in the Northeast for a long time, out of Connecticut and all that, and I'm getting tired of the cold.
You're getting tired of the cold. I'm right here, deep smack in the cold. I'm based in Canada. It's minus 20 Celsius now. We've got a snowstorm going on.
Oh man, wow!
Uh,
I don't miss it.
I want to give to visit Florida again. Beautiful, sunny Florida.
Yeah.
But yeah, Tom, I want to ask. So you're a U.S. Navy veteran. We've established that. How did that start? How did you get your start in the U.S. Navy?
Okay. Well, to start off with, I'm a big historian, military historian. World War II and that. Studied the Battle of Midway, Pacific, the Navy, and all of that, and love the water. But I was born and raised in Flushing, Queens. I'm one of 8 kids. I'm the third oldest, and I wound up working for the city of New York, down in Lower Manhattan, and things of that nature, and employed by the city of New York. I filed for the FDNY, the Fire Department in New York City, and was waiting upon to get hired after taking the written test, which I aced, and the physical test. But there was an issue with the test at the particular time. I'm not going to get into the details of it, but the list was canceled. I had 8 months to wait to get on the department, and the list was canceled. So I was laid off from the city job and sitting thinking, my life over at age 22. I was always taught and raised to give back, and I answered an ad in the Daily News, believe it or not, to see the world. I thought it was a cruise ship, but it was actually a Navy recruiter. So I went down and visited the Navy recruiter, and basically the Navy at the time offered me the opportunity and a great position to see the world, and a particular job that I liked. But I wanted to be a firefighter. I said, let me get in the Navy and do what they need me to do, and then I'll cross rate, as it's called. In the Navy, it's your rate, your job. to a damage control and get into firefighting. So, and if you do notice my shirt here, it is a 20th anniversary of 9/11 shirt, and all gave some gave all 20th anniversary shirt. So happy to be wearing that today. But I wound up going to school, and I got my orders after school, and it was for the USS Enterprise, which blew me away. I'm a Trekkie, Star Trek, and like the idea. I mean, the ship has a great reputation. It's one of the highest decorated ships in the Navy. It was the first nuclear aircraft carrier, and I was like, wow. I'm going to be in for a good time. A good time, but a busy time. So I served 4 years aboard the ship, did 2 world cruises, was involved in, just to correct you on the name of the operations, Eldorado Canyon, with Libya in 1986 and 1988 with Iran. And one of the big operations we were involved in that went on to some time was called Operation Earnest Will, which was basically escorting the oil tankers out of the Gulf and the other ships and things of that nature. That's what that's what the Navy does. And as you can see, the Navy is doing today. We protect the waterways. We protect shipping. It was a very exciting but very eventful time.
And I have a question. If you did not think it was a cruise, would you have had a preference for either the U.S. Army or the Air Force, or in your heart it was always going to be the Navy for you?
I mean, if I was going to serve, absolutely, it would be the Navy. It would be the Navy. I mean, people say different things like the Marines, with the reputation of the Marines are doing that. I was always a Marine guy, on the water, enjoy the water. You get into the stories of the old sailing days and all that stuff like that. But plus, if you get on an aircraft carrier and you're out at sea, we were the number one target out there when we were there, but you're basically pretty far away from when the main action is going on the
Right.
battlefield. I mean, that's the nature of the Navy. Why we have an aircraft carrier, so we can, have the force we need, but fight from a distance if we need to.
Right. And also, Tom, I had a question. So in the States, you got the Navy, the Air Force, the Army, and I guess people say Coast Guard and Space Force, but no one really focuses on that too much in the movies. So you got the Air Force, they've got planes, but they don't have boats or soldiers on the ground. Then
Mm-hmm.
you got the Army, they got soldiers on the grounds, but they don't have boats or planes. But then you got the
They
US
do.
Navy.
They do. The Army, the Air Force, was what was the Army Air Corps, and it
Right.
turned into the Air Force. But the Army does have some of its own boats. My father served on the supply ship for the Army in Korea. But yes, on the most part, you are correct. But I'm sorry. Continue with the question.
No worries at all,
Sorry.
man. This is your
Uh,
video, so don't worry about it. And what I wanted to ask is like, then you got the US Navy, which has like all of them. It's got, obviously, it's got the boats, it's got the naval vessels, then it's got like its own version of the ground troops, which would be the US Marines. Like, because for the longest time, I thought the US Marines were part of the Army. Turns out they're part of the Navy. And on the aircraft carriers, you got the Air Force as well. So you've got them all there.
we have a Marine detachment, like what people didn't. Which, if you watched 13 Hours in Benghazi, with all that what happened, um, I'm just going to say this: the truth of the matter is, there is a Marine detachment aboard an aircraft carrier. There's approximately 45 Marines, and that's the reason why they're there. If something goes down and we need to get a force in quickly, that's what the Marines are doing on board. And then, of course, you have your Navy SEALs, which is special operations, which, my opinion and the opinion of most people in the world, the Navy SEALs are the best. Marines are their own entity, but they do serve under the Department of the Navy. And Coast Guard, there's been a lot of movies, a lot of things and attention on Coast Guard, rescue divers, Coast Guard protecting our shores. Could be some very dangerous seas that the Coast Guard get involved in. But yes, there's not really that much of Coast Guard, and I with the Space Force, as we talked about, I don't really know much about the Space Force other than there's bases all over the place,
Yeah.
especially in Florida and out in Colorado where I was. There's like 2 or 3 bases in Colorado alone, I think.
Yeah, I'm very curious about Space Force. I don't know if they're preparing to fight aliens, preparing to fight like cosmonauts from Russia or something.
Well, there is the capability of having war up in space now.
For sure. For
As
sure.
much
It's
as
definitely
I
something
as
to
much as
consider.
I know that, I mean, space shuttles and different things and satellites and the different weaponry we have now, but I haven't been keeping tabs on it. You probably may know more about that than I do. So
I just know there's a show on Netflix. It's called Space Force. That's about it. Yeah, I'd be very interesting to see like the first Space Force veteran. That'd be curious.
I'll put you in contact with him when I find him.
For sure. I would definitely want to have that person down. And Tom, I wanted to ask, what was training like? Because when I had the other veteran on, Sergeant Madrid, I'm not sure if you saw his video. He was in the U.S. Army. I asked him a very important question. I asked him, Wilson, if someone completed all the training, but they were crying the whole time, would they still accept that person?
uh, if obviously if they pass all the qualifications and all that stuff like that, yes. But all I got to say is that particular description of what you said will be in his record and follow him. He's got to be watched. I mean, I had a particular believe it or not, I went to boot camp with this young man, and just put it this way, he decided that he was going to take his orders to wherever he was going and basically disregard them. And he tossed them. And I got aboard Enterprise, and probably a good to 8-9 months later, I saw him as a cook in the galley serving food, and I was like, "Whoa, what happened to you?" And he's like, "Well, it's a long story." I'm like, "Yeah, you get orders from the United States government, the Department of Defense. You basically don't want to ignore them."
Yeah.
Because I had an incident later on in my service. I was a master at arms, which is a ship's cop, and had to go pick up somebody that decided to ignore his orders. And our whole deployment was 8.5 months. He spent 9 months on the streets of San Francisco to avoid going.
Oh.
And then he was delivered. Then he was delivered to us when we got back. And this is where you're supposed to be.
Right. Because once you sign them papers, you're part of the army. You're part of the military.
Yeah, you're part of the military, unless there are opportunities, to my understanding. I don't know still, but you could buy your contract out under extenuating circumstances, or if something happens or medically, or you do something really crazy or stupid in boot camp, and they give you administrative discharge. But other than that, yeah, contract's a contract, and they take it pretty serious. That's all I'm going to say on that. I mean, he wound up doing big time. He wound up going to jail for it for a little
For sure.
while.
It's a big commitment that you sign up on. And Tom, I want to ask, so when we're talking about stuff like the US Army, we're talking about people on the ground in Iraq or Afghanistan. I want to ask, how did it look for you in the US Navy? Like, what was your average day looking at? Because you're in these massive vessels, whether they're aircraft carriers or other kind of ships. How did the average day look like in terms of like drills and action and things like this?
Okay. Again, the Marines were aboard. The Marines did a lot of training themselves and physical, PT, physical workout and training. Did a lot of cleaning. There wasn't really much for a Marine to do at sea other than train. As far as Navy, in my role in the beginning of the Navy, I was, logistics. I was supply. I was support. You worked a 12-hour day. I happened to, most of my military career, work nights, 7 at night to 7 in the morning. So shipboard life, it obviously kind of flipped upside down, because you're waking up you're waking up to go to work and they're having dinner. So either your choice is to have like a pork chop or a steak for dinner, or a salad or peanut butter and jelly. And then they had an opportunity later on in your shift, later on in the night, to have either breakfast or dinner. It was called mid rats, hence the word mid. It was mid rations. So I spent most of my Navy career on board at night. That's where a lot of the work was done. A lot of the big, higher ranking people weren't around. Very dangerous environment to work. For an aircraft carrier, the smaller ships are a little bit different. Of course, they get knocked around the sea a little bit more. But aboard an aircraft carrier, everything's moving all the time. So if you're out on the hangar deck, or you're out obviously on the flight deck is the most dangerous work environment in the world, hands down. And
can you give us more of an idea on those dangers? Because I'm assuming with all the massive machinery and ordnance, and then you got fighter jets.
Because you're having weapons move constantly, planes being moved constantly, and you have planes launching off the front of the ship and landing. Usually they do it in sequence, but it can be dependent on the situation. Of course, in a war zone or time of need, they're launching and recovering aircraft all at the same time. So when aircraft is moving aboard on the flight deck, the air boss is directing everything that happens. And all I have to say is you can have an aircraft engine, you can have a plane turning, blowing, and could blow you off the side of the ship, or you have a plane that has a propeller that you have to watch out for. The engine intake, there have sailors that have gone through the engine intakes. They get sucked into them, beside the point of it being very hot.
Right.
When the aircraft turns, and if you watch when it's on the catapult, a big shield comes up from behind it like that. Yeah, that's to block all the flame that's going to be shooting out of that plane when it starts. But when it's not in that capacity, still it's an aircraft with the engine running, with it turning and it moving, beside all the other equipment and all the other activity going on. So what they say on the flight deck, if you're an Airedale, that's what you are with the aircraft, you have to have your head on a swivel. You basically have to be able to sense and see at 360 at all times what's behind you. If it's directly behind you, you're going to either feel it, hear it, or someone's actually giving you a heads up. And everything on the flight deck is all hand signals, because you have your hearing protection on, because it's very loud. And basically, if someone gives you a signal to watch behind your back, you got to heed way, or watch out, as we say, heed in the Navy. But other than that, I don't really know how to explain it, because you have a hangar deck that's down below that all your aircraft are moving. They're parking, they're going on the elevator, they're going up, weapons are moving, supplies are moving. Plus you're on the sea. You're moving all the time. So
right.
We're basically a floating city with an airport on our roof.
Yeah.
So when you're taking on supplies, an underway replenishment, it's called, that's the most dangerous time ever, because you have ships alongside you feeding you fuel over big fuel lines. That pilots are being dropped on your roof by helicopters. And sometimes you have a ship on either side of you. And at one time, when the Russian cruiser was following us, our captain wanted to give the Russians a little lesson on underway replenishment, which the United States Navy at the time, and still has been doing a very, very long time. And we know what we're doing. We were basically launching and recovering planes and underway replenishment all at the same time, which basically has never been done before at that particular time. And it was nuts. It was crazy. And the Russians got upset, and that ship actually came in front of us and cut us off.
Did they get upset because of the noise? Because of like
Oh no, they
planes
got
flying
upset
low?
because they got upset because we were showing them how it was done.
Oh, okay.
How you supposed to, replenish at sea? How you supposed to how that yeah, we have an aircraft carrier. We could do all of that, and we're very good. And we were showing off, and they particularly did this particular ship didn't like it, and they said okay, so they went ahead and did a very dangerous move, and they cut in front of us, which we had to do a very dangerous maneuver called a breakaway, an emergency breakaway, and all the fuel lines get dropped, everything gets going, and it's a very dangerous maneuver to do, because to replenish at sea, all ships have to be sailing at the same speed, and you have
Right.
to keep the same pace. So if someone goes and cuts and someone slows, a line could get snapped. That can go and you get a thick wire line like an arresting gear or a metal line that thick, snap and go just like rope, and it comes and hits you. It's very dangerous. It can cut you in half.
Yeah, I
So
ask about all this because I mean, if I'm going to even dare to compare my experience to it, because I'm thinking of my time working in a warehouse, and we had all these safety precautions and all these injuries happen. And dude, we're just carrying basically pallets of ketchup. So I can't
yeah,
really imagine on like again this massive aircraft carrier, middle of the sea. You got all these tumbling waves. You got all these like 1,000-ton machineries, all this ordnance and jets. Like I can't imagine for a sec just like being sleep deprived or not paying attention in that environment. Because a
absolutely,
lot can go
absolutely.
wrong.
Absolutely, the cap as we were mentioning, we will mention when we were talking about, you're working 12-hour shifts and you're at sea for a long time, and some of the guys on the flight deck and different individuals on the ship, you're moving and you're doing this for 12 hours. You get tired, and you have tractors that are moving jets on the hangar bay, and then you have specialized forklifts, as you're saying, working in a warehouse. I've done logistics too, but they're moving weapons. They're moving bombs. We could say it now, the obvious, there are nuclear weapons. We've trained nuclear weapon drills that there was an accident with a nuclear weapon. Yes, you don't want that happening. But yeah, it's food is moving. A lot of the stores and the goods, unlike a warehouse with machinery, you can only move it so far with a machine because you have all the jets and everything in the way. You have to move it physically.
Yeah.
You have to move it by hand.
And
And large working parties, you're moving cases of food to the elevator or up and down ladders, paint cans up and down ladders, down 7 decks. It's manual labor. Uh, One time before Australia, we got an underway replenishment. We got our supplies. We're on our way to Australia. We basically weren't going to go on Liberty or get off the ship unless everything was put away. It took almost 3 days straight of working. Yes, 3 days straight,
have you
12
seen any
hours.
accidents happen, Tom?
Oh, plenty of accidents happened. Individuals would go into unventilated storerooms without a breathing apparatus on. It was a chemical storeroom, which, as it turns out, to the obvious, there should have been some type of ventilation for this storeroom, but it wasn't working. I knew the person. I wouldn't call him a friend, but he was an associate. I knew him. He was from another division. He decided that he was going to try and run down and get what he needed without a breathing apparatus on. And the guy that was with him, who was on the ladder, they both fell and they both died.
Oh, rest their
That
souls.
it's just yes, there are rules and regulations and things that you need to do, but unlike a lot of situations in civilian life, if you don't pay attention to it, it can cost you your life. So yes, banging heads, tripping. Myself personally, an individual didn't mark off an area with safety cones and tape. He was spraying industrial rust preventative armor all
Yikes.
onto an engine, onto a chain that hoists engines. I came out from behind a wing of an aircraft, and he sprayed me right in the face with it.
I'm guessing a lot of this stuff would give the people at OSHA a stroke.
Oh, absolutely. Especially in the service. So I knew who his boss was.
Mhm.
He worked like right there. I went to a master chief, who is basically a equivalent like of a higher sergeant. Very experienced, 25, 30 year, in the service. I went up to him and I explained to him what happened, and I had to go to medical. I had my eyes flushed for over an hour. They were flushing my eyes, and I just as that, I'm just telling you what happened. No safety cones, no safety tape. I'm on my way to medical, and of course, that individual probably got into some serious trouble.
As he should have. I'm glad you're still here with us, Tom, despite not even despite the enemy, despite your fellow soldiers. And Tom, so that's how it looks like running and managing a ship. You know, the logistics, the ordnance, and stuff like that. I want to ask, how does it look like when action happens? Because you mentioned the Russians, even though it didn't seem you guys were fighting in that story. What happens, like example, off the coast of Libya or Iran or other places, when you guys are being locked on by the enemy? How does that look?
Okay. With the Russians, we spent most of our time avoiding them. Obviously, you don't want the Russians to know where we are. We got from the coast of off the coast of California to the Philippines, stopping in Hawaii undetected by the Russians, which that's a big deal. But let's get into a situation where we're a Western Pacific ship. We're a Pacific, but it's called the West Pac. We usually supposed to hang out in the western area of the Pacific Ocean. Wound up being redeployed over to the Mediterranean. You're going from one fleet to the other. Most importantly, at the time, we lost our beer day. We couldn't have a beer day. Sixth Fleet doesn't have a beer day, so we had to throw our beer over the side. But we're in the Med, and things get tense. Captain makes announcements and things of that nature. We transited the Suez Canal. At the time, I believe we paid Egypt like $3.5 million to transit the Suez Canal, our whole battle group, nuclear ships, and sat off the coast of Libya. What was interesting is we didn't find out that we crossed over what, at the time, Gaddafi called the line of death. He made a line basically off his coast and said, if we cross it, he's going, whatever, he threatened us. We found out from my lieutenant's father, who watched the BBC, that we were actually going through the Suez Canal, and we crossed over the line of death, and we didn't know we were over the line of death until our captain told us we were coming back out over it.
Did it feel like
He
a line
just
of death? Like, was there any
well, well,
mines or?
well. I mean, it's a coordinate. It's a coordinates you're not supposed to cross, but not knowing. I guess that was the captain's decision. But of course, we were prepped in a posture that we were about to go do something that may be potentially dangerous. All our jets, all our pilots were fully prepared. They're called sanitized flight suits. Like they were fully geared and ready and dressed for war if it happened. Um, Fortunately, Gaddafi didn't deliver on his promise. Nothing seriously happened from that. But as history tells us, and Operation Eldorado Canyon, we had bombers fly down from England, and basically we bombed Benghazi and Tripoli,
Right.
which is the Operation Eldorado Canyon. And Gaddafi and things that in that particular area of the world were pretty quiet for about 25 years. That's what I got to say about that.
Yeah, and then
Mess,
Benghazi
mess,
got bombed again.
message was received.
Tom,
We
if I
we
could
did.
ask you, I apologize for
Go
interrupting. I just
ahead.
wanted to ask this quickly. You said that there was a concern of an attack from Gaddafi, but I want to ask, it's not in your time, it wasn't like in World War II where you can see, like, the Germans and the Japanese could damage US seacraft, like they could damage the destroyers and the aircraft carriers. In the 80s when you were serving, was there Like, was there really an enemy who could like pose a risk to the ships? Like, did they have those capabilities?
Well, I remember correctly, he had a decent air force. He did have aircraft with the capability of doing it. The main thing and issue for a lot of the enemy is they may have the aircraft or weapons, but they don't have the training and the skill that the United States Navy does, and some of the other um, forces and navies of the world. And keep in mind, a lot of people have to be reminded about, because everyone goes, well, the cost of an aircraft carrier and things of that nature. You have a ship with approximately 80 to 85 aircraft. That's larger than 1/3 of the world's air forces. So look at it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have 80 aircraft. As we've seen in world events, different people, while ships are in port, while they're at their weakest, our ships have been bombed. You know, people have driven boats and ships up alongside them and damaged them. Uh, uh, some of the third anybody uh, with the right weaponry, like you've seen what happened in Afghanistan, special operations, the most special operation uh, personnel killed at one time. 30 was shot down by a rocket held, I think it was a rocket held uh, missile or grenade launcher, a missile launcher
A
by a
stinger.
14-year-old.
Yeah.
That was the big worry after 9/11 with it, airports and different things. Someone placed at the right time with the right weapon with skill can do some severe damage. Um, the Russians, of course, were always out there that had the potential. Um, I'm trying to remember back world affairs at the time, but there were tense moments all over the globe. It just most of the focus was in the Middle East, and the 4 years I was in happened to be in the center of it. So Iran too. Iran, if you watch Top Gun Maverick, when they talk about those missile envelopes and those things, that they had a whole coast of missile envelopes on that were very, very dangerous, that our pilots were, you know, very concerned about. Iran had the weaponry to do it. Um, it unnerves me to watch what's going on in the world now. Obviously, we're living in dangerous times
For sure. And
still.
I hope it doesn't escalate, because I think we've gotten to know each other, like all the people, all the countries around the world. I think they've become familiar with each other through like the internet and universities and stuff, to not really want to see the other person be wiped out. Maybe in small parts around the world, but not as much as before, I feel. But
Uh,
Mhm.
People have strong feelings about different topics that they're going to get into. There's religious differences and things of that nature going on in the world still, and it's just simple. We all need to get along. It's that simple. I mean,
We gotta.
the different songs. Um,
Tom, I also want to ask, and I asked this to Sergeant Madrid in his video. When you were in combat with the other side, like whether it was the Libyans, the Iranians, the Russians, things like this, did you ever see them as like purely the enemy, or you just saw them as like a regular Joe, just like yourself, on the other side by chance? And we can give a lot of criticism to like Gaddafi and Saddam and all those kinds of leaders as dictators or authoritarians. But what about like? But I want to have your view on like just the average guy. He's got a wife, he's got a kids. He's the same as you, just on another ship in another language.
um, that's a that's a tough question, but um, from one war to the other, the respect is always there. Um, but when you're in the moment, you're in the situation, you have a job to do. At the end of the day, you follow orders. Um, as everyone, I think, understands by this time, orders are orders. They don't have to explain to why you're doing it. In the military, you follow an order, unquestionable. Um, did I agree, or do I agree now on the different reasons for the altercations and things going on in the world? No. Through my experience in that, the last thing I wish on anybody is going to war. But certain situations that happen, it is a necessity. Um, Obviously, you want to go the diplomatic route first, and wear that out as far as you possibly can. But if the word retaliation or the different things that you hear when a country takes action on an American or American soil or American unit, ship, whatever it may be, um, a response is necessary. Um, that's my opinion on that. I just watching it on some of the shows and movies before. Sometimes I sit and watch them with my mother. Believe it or not, my mother had to watch me, on the news, in the middle of an action with, the Secretary of Defense on the news or the World News Report. I woke up after the Alpha strike on Iran. I woke up at 6 o'clock at night, and we were on World News Report. Woke up to what was going on. I slept through the actual operation, so I worked nights, but I did watch, as I said, everything moving all at one time. When you're preparing for a strike, things are moving double time all day long. They're loading weapons, and all those planes were fully loaded. And I got off work at 7 o'clock, and about 3 minutes after 7, that catapult slammed and the Alpha strike started. And then I went to bed and woke up to what actually happened. I'm sure my parents were scared stiff.
Yeah. I
My
guess it's
mother.
like, as my dad said, and he's also a veteran from the Lebanese Civil War. He said you you could feel bad for the guy on the other side after the war when there was peace, but in the moment you had to do what you had to do to survive or protect your family or protect your land, things like
Mhm.
this.
Exactly, and just like with the American Civil War, you're fighting your own. That's
Yeah.
internal, brother against brother, and all that other stuff. That I have the most high respect for your father, because that I'm not going to make comment on degrees of war, but a civil war to me is unmanageable. I just don't know. And again, I'm a historian and know a lot about the Civil War. Brother fighting brother. I would not imagine that,
Yeah. It's
myself
not one of
personally.
his he doesn't look at it with pride. And my dad, like, I find veterans actually make the biggest pacifists. They're not like hippies who are just following a trend and kumbaya and smoking pot and not taking a shower. Like, they've actually seen war, like
Hmm.
they understand like the consequences. And that's why a lot of them make good pacifists, because like they know what the cost is, and they don't want to deal with that if they don't have to.
Read about Dwight Eisenhower
Yeah.
after the war as a leader. I mean, he was the highest ranking person in that war and seen it all, and the military complex and all that stuff like that. Totally against it.
Yeah. I definitely need to read more on Dwight. Because I focus more on World War II, like when I read, but I haven't really focused on the post-war era.
Yeah, aftermath, and then the president, other than Reagan, who was commander in chief when I served, and Lincoln with the Civil War, as we just mentioned, Harry S. Truman is a man that you want to sit and read about, and that decision to use the atom bomb. That was one of the toughest decisions I think any commander in chief or president had to make. So
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to get into in terms of history. But again, Tom, I want to keep this video focused on your story. And
hmm
to kind of,
hmm
regarding your experience in the Navy, I kind of want to ask about this before I move on to your views on other topics.
hmm
To sum up your experience in the Navy, I want to ask, you got all these guys and gals these days on a boat, on a submarine, you're in the middle of the ocean, you're traveling all around the world. How did you guys keep entertained? Like, what did R&R look like?
Um, I can tell you aboard my ship, we had a radio station, we had a TV station, um, we had bingo, did a lot of crazy things aboard ship when you cross the equator. It's called WOG Day. It's an initiation. That's a lot of fun. It relieves a lot of stress. But when you get into port, American sailors at different parts of the world, just put it. The old saying is, we worked hard and we played hard. Uh, Unfortunately, it just happens with stress, and you have young people. There's drinking involved. Um, a lot of things. What happened? I remember back in the service, what we got back from deployments was DUIs. Um, we had a captain. Uh, I had a highly respected captain, the best captain you ever want to have. His call sign was Rocky, Captain Robert Spain. But a new captain took over right near the end of my service aboard Enterprise, and unfortunately, his son was a victim of a drunk driver.
Oh,
So DUIs are taken very serious. But with this captain, one of the problems is you see like on Top Gun, a lot of young guys like to ride motorcycles, and he put a motorcycle wreck on the afterbrow of the ship to uh, remind the crew that reckless behavior. Everyone wants to keep that thrill. When you're deployed, there's high stress levels. Um, young military people sometimes take risks they shouldn't take to get a thrill. It's the nature of the beast. I'm not condoning a lot of what happened when we were on Liberty and things of that nature, but um, it's a nature of the beast with military people. It just has to be like anything; it has to be controlled. Too much of anything is not good for you. But yeah, it thrill seeking. Uh, there were you go to different places of the world. You go on safaris. You go on your trips. It's very exciting to see and meet the people around. For me personally, to meet the different people around the world, the different cultures, the different foods. I got very into that. That's how I relieved stress and the recreation. I mean, uh, there were no sat phones and internet back when I was on. So to a lot of your time is writing and calling home.
was there ever any like, I guess we'd call them lovers' quarrels or something like that, where I'm guessing you got a lot of young men there, like straight from home, straight from high school, and one day they wake up, turns out they're married to some girl in Asia or Africa or South America, or they don't even have to wake up drunk. They just like fall in love because that's the first person they fall
Yeah,
in love with.
yeah. I mean, that's the advice I gave a lot of the young guys. After my first cruise, it was given to me, but I was older. I joined the Navy at 22, not to the buddy system and all of that. But yeah, you go into country, you go like the Philippines and different places. Don't sign anything, because more than likely you're signing a document that you just promised yourself to that young lady, and to get out of it, you had to pay some money. Uh, do we want to call it blackmail? But it was what it was. It was basically they did it to corner you into either marrying them or the money. And
It was definitely opportunistic.
yeah, and being of that age, obviously you couldn't afford the amount of money. If I remember correctly, it was like upwards $2,000-$3,000.
Oh wow.
Your command would pay it, and then not only would you have to repay it from the deduction of your pay, also you got in trouble. You would
Was
go.
was
You would.
there ever warnings like if she has a Russian accent and is asking about the radio codes,
Yeah.
Hit twice as hard or be
Yeah,
twice as
yeah. I
careful.
was just talking about it today because the Navy a lot. This guy served a while back, and he was actually he was a weapons guy or a gunner's mate, but he was a nuclear gunner's mate, and they had special insignias, and you'd be able to see who it is and what they do. So yeah, you had Russian women all over you all the time, and then they kept the gunner's mate rate insignia, and they eliminated all that other markings and nuclear or any special stuff, so no one would be able to tell that you were a special gunner's mate, or you have operations and lightning bolts and things. You're telling the world that yeah, you have access to information and capabilities that Russian woman wants to know.
Yeah, the
Things like
honeypots.
that.
I feel
So
like espionage back then was a lot more fun, if I may say, because back then, if you're, I guess, if you had state secrets or something, you could expect like someone to come up to you with either like a beautiful woman with a Russian accent or some money and vodka. These days, I think they just like look at your social media to save to see if you posted anything stupid.
oh, absolutely. That again, too. When you're overseas, especially when you're a war zone. I mean, uh, you, it's very easy to technology is very easy to track where you are. So
Yeah.
obviously there are strict rules on when you can access, how you can access things of that nature. But back in the day, too, simply if you wrote a letter or you wrote on any piece of paper aboard ship, it had to go into a burn bag.
Right.
It was burned. We had that Russian cruiser, and there's Russian trawlers following all the whole fleet. So, and they're picking trash out of the water. Believe it or not, just sifting through trash to look for any clue or anything or where we're going. And I get a kick out of telling people all the time, how'd you ever tell your family where you were or where you were going? Speaking of code, I spoke to them in code. I spoke to them, to my mother, telling them where they were going, that only things my mother would know or my family member would know.
Right.
Unless I was stupid and said, hey, Michael's birthday is, the Russians don't know when Michael's birthday is. But,
Oh, for
so
sure.
you had to be careful how you spoke, wrote, acted. Yeah, especially an American sailor off the Enterprise overseas, and that how we're looked at as we did a lot of diplomacy. You're looked at through a microscope. You're watched everything you do. So
Yeah, it's definitely a lot of responsibilities because if some one person slips their mouth, it could be a lot of danger for your crew and things like this.
happened in
But
World War II before D-Day.
yeah,
A guy got drunk in a bar and started blabbering his mouth. Not only that, in the London Times, I think it was, if you could check the history of trivia and my knowledge on this, there were code words and names of the beaches in a crossword puzzle in the London Times.
wow.
Yeah, Omaha.
Yeah, definitely a lot of code breaking and espionage there. And Tom, like, you gave us like a big view of the Navy. You gave us the view of like the training, the action, the R&R, how it looks like to be on the ship. But the one of the views I definitely want to touch upon here is how did it end? Like, how did your service end?
For myself personally, uh, I served my 4 years. I served it proudly. But towards the end of my service, I had personal things going on. Um, uh, I was married before my second deployment. Um, my wife at the time, you know, I, I had a daughter born when I was at sea. Talk about the word sacrifice. I basically sacrificed a wife and daughter for the Navy, and for my behavior towards the end of the at the end of the serving, get back to the drinking. Um, that was one of the things I did to excess. And I'll just leave it at the United States Navy didn't invite me to reenlist.
Right.
Um, uh, one of those things of life's regrets or mistakes. That was a major regret in my life. It is what it is. I, I, I drank a lot, um, serving. That's how I dealt with stress in life at the time. I had to go to career alcohol counseling. It was called CAC, career alcohol counseling. The writing was on the wall. That I myself personally was not acting in a respectful way as far as the United States Navy was concerned. So I, I wasn't asked to reenlist. I left the Navy. I lost my family for it, and I came back to I came back to the East Coast to New York and got on with my life. That's a regret I have. That there are a lot of family issues and addiction issues and things that people who served for a number of reasons: the mental health, PTSD, injuries, pain, getting addicted to pain medication. That's why the VA is very strict now on pain management, things of that nature. They're using some state of the art drugs now. A lot from I hear a word on the street. People I know using it, it's not helping. Can get into the whole conversation and how the VA and the veterans, how they're being treated and helped. I do a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis there with that organization Vet Unite, to get resources to the veterans that they need, because the VA healthcare system is too large. It's too broken. Um, they're not
Do you
getting
feel
care.
do you feel the army helped you? Now it may be a different story with the army and the VA, but back then in the 80s, do you feel like, not the army, the military? Do you feel the military helped you transition back into civilian life?
Um, Transition. I didn't hear the word transition to the years after I got out of the service. There was no such thing. Um, the military back then, the word prepare, the saying that I use and the people I run with, you prepare us to go to war, or you need to prepare us to come back to civilian uh, life. And they still do not do it properly. They're trying, but back when I got out, there was nothing. Um, you had a short thing with the chaplain. You had hours sitting, 2 or 3 hours in a classroom type situation to prepare you, like resume writing, how to look for a job, and your chaplain told you about family life and trying to acclimate into a civilian society, things of that nature. But uh, you were basically handed your discharge papers, your last paycheck, and they showed you where the gate was. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you for serving, and you were gone. You were kind of on your own, other than pointing to the VA or something like that. That is something that you needed. You got like one of those little phone books or one of those little resource books, a point of contact to do if you needed any help with a VA loan, or you're trying to buy a house or things like that. But they didn't have the counselors, and now to my understanding from a lot of young men and women is, they start transitioning you, quote unquote, or trying to prepare you months before you get out.
Right.
you know they help you with transitioning formulating the language of the skills that you acquired in the service to find that job. But there's still a lot, there's still a lot of improvement to be made, both in the VA care system and the military transitioning their personnel out of the service. There's still a lot of work to do.
Right.
And I personally know friends that are doing that as a civilian capacity. They are working with the Department of Defense to teach the Department of Defense to teach their people military sexual trauma, how to behave, how to treat each other, things of that nature, on a high level. A couple of friends I have work with higher levels of the Department of Defense, especially for the Marines. This particular woman I know, dealing with high level people on that, and they're trying to fix it. They are. Same with the Air Force and things of that nature. They are trying really hard. Unfortunately, you find out about the different bases in Fort Hood and the different things that are going on. Some of these bases are still going on.
Right. Do you find support also from the civilian sector as well? Like not from the military, but from like philanthropy groups,
Yes,
organizations. I'm not going to
yes,
call it charity. I'm going to call it people like who are there to help the veterans.
yes. That's what I do a lot of, is finding these people, finding these organizations that I try and assist. I try and assist and help the people who are trying to assist and help transition military people. Call it a passion, call it a mission, call it whatever it may be, but I do that on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
It's
Because even
fine.
for my dad and his friends and his brothers, because they were all involved in the war, for them, because in Lebanon it's not as developed as in the West. For him, it was mostly about prayer and going back into work to keep his mind off of it. So but still, like with my conversations with my dad as well as other veterans, and I've even had actually when I visited Florida, I had a very nice conversation with a Gulf War veteran in a bar in Florida in 2006, 2015. I forgot the bar's name and I forgot his name. But I think if you may let me have this viewpoint, I think it's sad when we take a lot of these young people, we put them in a war in a different part of the world. We we take a lot out of them. We expect a lot out of them. They sacrifice a lot of their well-being and health for us. And then the least we can do when they return back is to support them. Because I feel like the media, and I'm not talking about regular Joes, I feel like the media and a lot of like government stuff, they like their heroes dead. They like to have them at the peak of their life, the nice images, but then we've still got like a lot of these people who served at home. They need support, like they need to be transitioned back into like a decent job. They need all the health care because there's a lot of damage that comes out of that stuff, and they just need to be supported by their community and not like thought of as a bad memory.
Absolutely. I mean, talking before we started about Dr. Edward Tick, who's been treating PTSD since Vietnam. And we were talking about the American Indian. And he goes, we as a society, remember George Washington was the one that said you could judge a nation by how it treats its veterans. But the American Indian, the warrior, uh, adopted their lifestyle on buffalo, how the Indians would watch the buffalo. You remember dances, Dances with Wolves, how they would watch the buffalo. The buffalo herd, once it's in danger, the strong bulls and the males would surround the herd and protect the herd. And when the danger went away, the herd went around and helped and protected and served these strong bulls and the males that protected them. That's how the Indians were. They come back from battle, and they would go in and cleanse, and they would go in and take care of themselves in the woods, and go away from the tribe. And then when they came back, the tribe welcomed them back and took care of them.
Yeah, I feel like we've lost a lot of that these days.
Yeah. It there To stay on the positive side, when I go out there any given day, there are a lot of good people out there that they're trying. Just put that they're trying. But yes, most of society, how we are today, especially in the United States, everyone's me.
Yeah,
And we as a country, we as a world, as a society, we've been through some tough times lately, and you had COVID and storms and things are going on now. Um, we have to look within ourselves, and we have to help one another. That's a message that everyone needs to hear. I don't want to be preaching to the choir. I know better than anybody, but it's fairly simple. I mean, we have to start thinking of one another.
I completely agree. And Tom, because we're now reaching towards the end of the video, but I definitely want to have your opinion on this. My channel is mostly geared towards people my age, so that's millennial generation, younger even, maybe the Gen Zs. And I want to ask you, Tom, you having seen more of the world, especially some of the harder stuff in the military, what do you think of my generation? Because to be frank, I feel like a lot of my generation, we don't want to sign up for the military. We don't want to sign up for active duty. Part of it is because, like, we kind of feel like the government represents or takes care of us less and less than before. And part of it, I think, is we have become very soft with like all the junk food, the technology, and things like this. So, like your drill instructor isn't going to put your feelings into consideration when he's turning you into like a fighting machine. I want to ask Tom, like, when you see my generation, like, what's your view on them? Are we soft or is it something else?
Um, I believe. I mean, growing up, I was born in the early '60s. You have the '70s, and what the generation before us offers us or prepares the younger generation. The generation up above me thought the same way of us. You say, oh, my father would say, when I was younger in grammar school, we had to walk to school 2 miles through the snow, blah, 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 blah. You guys have it so easy. You have it so easy. I think it's just a generational thing. And I think that feeling now, especially nowadays, through what the country and the world as a whole has been going through, um, we need to evaluate how society thinks and change that entirely. Is my opinion. How we're conditioned from how we're younger, how we're thought, how we're put into a category, and these days the thing that really that's too much of a strong word. What I get frustrated with it is everyone thinks of themselves, and this younger generation is the end result of that. Now, it's the younger generation is put in a position through what's going on in the world. There's a lot of stress. I mean, back in my time, there was the Vietnam War. There were race issues, civil rights. That the younger generation, because I'm trying to remember back when I was through ages 13 and 20 with yeah, you know, look at the Cold War. World could end at any day. Cuban Missile Crisis on, Vietnam, whatever. I mean, it's just what's happened on how we're conditioned through time. Now we're looking at the end result now at your younger generation, but a lot of the younger generation I meet, because I like talking to the young, and that a lot more together on what they wish to do with their lives, and worldview, and that you'd be surprised. I'm surprised. I'm pleasantly surprised all the time. I go out with the positive attitude that I'm talking about. I can't think about me or think about my view. We all have to get used to each other's views and respect each other's views. That's another thing that frustrates me now. You can't get into a discussion about anything. You can't disagree on anything with anybody.
Yeah, you could always get
Right?
canceled.
it just gets into back and forth and whatever like that. Let's agree to disagree. That's a saying from my time. My mother just said it the other day.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist anymore. You either agree with that person's view, or you wind up to an argument, or you don't talk to your neighbor at all. Everyone says to me, I say to, well, you got that cute little kid in front of you in the line in the supermarket. You do one of these little things for the kid because you got this cute smile. What are you doing? Well, I can't wave at a child. No, you can't even wave at a child anymore.
Yeah.
The parent looks at you like you're nuts. Am I nuts? No, I'm not nuts. It's just I try to keep my view and keep my view positive, and what people think about. I don't get into all of that. I'm not going to get into an argument with anybody. God forbid you disagree.
Yeah, if I can offer some positivity on that, I think it's coming back to normal because, like I say, with people my age and even the youngers, they're kind of sick of all this new stuff. That okay, we tried it. We tried like not being able to agree with each other's opinions. We've tried like being sensitive about everything, and we don't like it. So let's go back. So if I can
Yeah.
offer some positivity there, Tom, I think things are slowly coming back from what I
Yes, they are. There's a lot of hey, hold the door for somebody. Smile at somebody. Pass on the hope and love and joy. I work with an organization called Hearts of Hope and things like that. Pass on the hope and just do one positive thing for somebody else, and it does. It spreads.
Yeah.
It spreads. It does.
Yeah. So Tom, I want to say I'm going to say this is an amazing episode. I've really enjoyed having you on and learning from your experience because just because me and people my age weren't there doesn't mean we can't learn anything from the people who were there and who've had those perspectives. I feel like
Absolutely.
you and other veterans have paid a lot in terms of health and time to have those unique perspectives, but they're valuable perspectives nonetheless for people my generation. So, Tom, I want to ask you before we kind of end the video, do you have any words of advice for the viewers out there?
Um, that's a good question. And I'll sum it up. I was talking about this gentleman not 2 hours ago. Tom Armis is a Marine colonel who was a keynote speaker on Memorial Day in Fairfield, Connecticut, back where I lived, after the parade. And this gentleman was a 9/11 hero. He worked for Homeland Security. I picture him. He dove on this woman on the ground level when the building collapsed on him and was able to carry this woman out of the building. And he just simply said to the townspeople of Fairfield after this parade, you don't have to thank me for my service. You don't have to thank me for the sacrifice and all that other stuff that people generally say. What I truly and sincerely want you to do with what you're about to say or your feelings is enjoy yourself at that picnic. Enjoy yourself out on the beach. Enjoy that freedom that you have, that we happen to go ahead and take part in different things that we've done on behalf of the American people. Is go out and enjoy that freedom. That's what you can do for me. I thought that was one of the greatest things I've ever heard said at a speech or anything for people to understand. Everyone out there, enjoy your freedoms that you have. Enjoy those special days, the memorial days, and the different things that we've done for you. I take that thank you for your service. I say it's an honor and privilege. That's what I respond with. Some have different views on that, especially Vietnam veterans. Just go out and enjoy your everyday freedom, and that's good enough for me.
I appreciate you, Tom. Thank you for your service.
Again, it's my honor and privilege.
Beautiful. So, guys, there we go. We have Tom's amazing story. Tom, do you have any media you want to promote? Any groups on Facebook, Instagram, things like this?
Vetunite.org. You can share that website of what we do. Support us because we're a nonprofit that kind of things do things a little bit differently. We go out again. We support the organizations that support and assist veterans. We need donations and support and things of that nature to sustain what we do. But support us so we can support them.
Thanks, Tom. And guys, all those links that Tom mentioned will be on the description down below. So please check him out and consider passing a donation and support to these groups he just mentioned. And guys, if you haven't already done so, please like this video, subscribe to this channel, share our social media, because doing so helps us grow. The more we grow, the more amazing veterans we can bring in, like Tom.
Thank you.
Everyone, have a great day. And Tom, I've said it many times, I'll say it again. Thank you.
You're very welcome. My honor and privilege to be on here.